Hey guys, this is your video notes for niches and habitats. So today, remember as you go through the video, pause as needed to make notes, and let's get started. So to begin with, let's get our aim, and the aim for this set of notes is how does an organism's niche differ from its habitat? So pause the video as needed so that you can complete your notes. So today we're going to unravel the mysteries of ecology by understanding how an organism's niche differs from its habitat. So we'll discover how each organism has a unique role that it plays within its environment. All right, so let's begin with what a niche is. So think of it as a job or role an organism plays in its community. It's about how it interacts with its environment and the other organisms, including what it eats, where it finds shelter, and how it may reproduce. For instance, a bullfrog's niche involves catching various prey and avoiding predators like herons and raccoons. All right, so a niche is a role an organism plays in its habitat. The full range of physical and biological conditions in which an organism lives and the way in which the organism uses those conditions. All right, so for example, part of the description of an organism's niche includes where it occurs in the food chain for an area, the range of temperatures that an organism needs to survive, the food that it eats, the physical conditions necessary for survival, how it reproduces, all right. So, as previously mentioned, a niche includes the type of food an organism eats, how it obtains the food, and which species uses the organism as food. So, like we mentioned a moment ago, an adult bullfrog catches insects, worms, spiders, and small fish, and sometimes mice. However, they are also preyed upon by large birds known as herons, raccoons, and snakes. All right. So, the physical conditions that a bullfrog requires to survive are also part of its niche. It's not just about what an organism eats. So, bullfrogs spend their lives in or near bodies of water, such as ponds, lakes, or slow-moving streams. All right. So, a bullfrog's body temperature varies with that of the surrounding air and water, so this means it is cold-blooded. So as winter approaches, the bullfrog burrows into the mud of a pond or stream to hibernate. All right, and the last part addresses the reproduction of the bullfrog. So here it also includes how and where the bullfrog reproduces. So all of this is going back to the idea of the difference between a niche and a habitat. All right, so no two species can have the exact same niche in the same habitat. This would lead to direct competition for resources. However, similar species can have overlapping niches, like the North American warblers. They feed at different heights of the tree in order to avoid direct competition. This segregation of niches allows for the biodiversity within the same habitat. So again, different species can occupy niches that are similar, but they're not going to be exactly the same. All right, so again, the species are similar, yet they're slightly different in their niche within the forest. All right, and here's a visual example of what we're talking about. So the different warblers occupy different layers of the tree. So that allows them to hunt for different things. Therefore, there is not direct competition. So to summarize niches, a niche may be described in terms of space utilization, food consumption, temperature range, an organism's behavior, or mating requirements. You can think of an organism's niche as its job or role within the environment. All right, so now let's move on to the idea of habitat. So, if a niche is an organism's job, then its habitat is its home. A habitat provides the environmental conditions an organism needs to survive. This includes access to food, mates, and shelter. Different organisms require different habitats based on their needs. So, a habitat is a place where an organism makes its home. All right? The habitat must meet all of the environmental conditions an organism needs to survive. So what do animals need in their habitats to survive? Well, they all need specific things. Number one, they are going to need food. Number two, they're going to need the opportunity to select mates for reproduction. They are actually going to have to be able to successfully reproduce. All right, so what do plants need in their habitat to survive? So they're going to need the right combination of light for photosynthesis, air, water, and soil. For example, the prickly pear cactus was adapted for sandy soil, dry climate, and bright sunlight. So this plant is going to grow well in desert areas. It would not thrive in wet, cool areas with large amounts of overcast weather. So again, habitat is going to be specific to the organism. All right. Habitats must also have suitable arrangements for resources for an organism to thrive. For example, animals. For animals, this would mean it must have enough space, shelter, food, and water. For plants, it would need the right combination of light, water, air, and soil. All right. Oops, sorry. All right, you can pause the video there to make notes of those things, but that was just summarized a moment ago in that little slide's epilogue. All right, so continuing on looking at suitable arrangements here. So, for example, a habitat for a puma could have the right amount of food, such as deer, porcupine, rabbits, and rodents, water, like a lake, river, or spring, and shelter, which would consist of trees or dens on the forest floor. All right, still looking at suitable arrangement here. Which component of the puma's habitat is not being met? So again, right now we are looking at food and water and shelter. All right, so the puma's habitat would not have a suitable arrangement. However, it lacks enough space for this large predator to establish its own territory. What would cause an animal to lose this component of its habitat? Well, for the most part, this would mainly be humans building homes and businesses, pushing these animals into smaller areas, making them too small for these large predators to survive, which ends up causing either population drop for those predators or them being removed from the food chain. All right, so this is one of the many dangers that have caused pumas to become endangered. All right, so these are basically large cats like cougars. All right, so now let's look at space. So space is a crucial component of a habitat. While carpenter ant colonies need only a few square inches, larger animals like cougars need hundreds of square miles for hunting and finding mates. Similarly, giant redwood trees require vast spaces to reach their full size, something that is often not possible in small parks. So, the amount of space needed for organisms is going to vary greatly species to species. Some species require smaller amounts of space, while others will need larger amounts of space. For example, like we said, the carpenter ant doesn't need a lot of room, whereas organisms like cougars require much larger amounts of land in order to survive. All right, so space. So plants need space too, but like we said, some plants need more space than others. So the coastal redwood trees can reach more than 15 feet in diameter and 350 feet in height. So a tree this massive would not have enough space to grow and thrive in a small park. These that you see here are or in Redwood National Forest in California. So these are huge. All right, so we talked about space. Now let's look at food. So food availability directly impacts an organism's ability to survive in its habitat. For example, black bears in Minnesota rely on a diet of plants and berries, which can be affected by drought. Similarly, water quality and availability can make or break a habitat's suitability for its inhabitants, from camels to cattails. All right. So, too much food can also disrupt a habitat. So, notice here, algae is a microscopic aquatic organism that makes its own food through the process of photosynthesis. Nutrients like phosphorus can contribute to the spread of algae. When a freshwater habitat has a sharp increase in phosphorus, an algae bloom can occur. So, an algae bloom is what you see here, this quick overproduction of algae. You wouldn't think this could be bad, but on larger scales, it can be devastating for an ecosystem. So algae can die very quickly, and this decaying algae can also introduce another algal bloom. So an algal bloom can discolor the water, turning it green, red, and brown. These also absorb oxygen from the water, destroying the habitat for organisms like fish and other plants. All right, these excess nutrients for algae can destroy the habitat's food chain. So, and most of the time, these nutrients come from the form of fertilizer that we use to produce our own agriculture. All right, so now let's look at water. Water is essential for all forms of life. Every habitat must have some form of water supply. Some organisms need lots of water while others need very little. For example, camels are known for their ability to carry goods and people over long distances without needing much water. All right, this breed of camels have one hump and can travel 100 miles without a drink of water. A picture of those camels is here. So, even with very little access to water in a hot, dry climate, these camels have a suitable arrangement in northern Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. All right, so now let's look on the other side of the spectrum. Let's look at some cattails. So, cattails, on the other hand, are plants that grow best in wet areas like marshes and swamps. A cattail's habitat's suitable arrangement depends on water. All right, so imagine a pond at the bottom of a dirt-covered cliff. If enough loose dirt slid down into the pond, it could fill up the pond and absorb the water, leaving not enough for the cattails to grow. All right, so this is a larger section of a cattail patch. All right, now let's look at the last item, which would be that of shelter. So an organism's shelter protects it from predators and weather. So shelter also provides space for eating, sleeping, hunting, and raising young. Shelters come in a variety of forms. A single tree, for example, can provide sheltered habitats for many different organisms. From an eagle's nest at the very top to a caterpillar being sheltered from the rain by a leaf, or like the frog you see here in the picture. All right. All right, so for a mushroom fungus, shelter might be a cool, damp area near the roots. And for the bald eagle, you're often going to find them perching or making a nest at the top of the tree. All right, so to sum up, while a habitat is a physical space where an organism lives, a niche is an organism's role within that space. It's a complex interaction of a number of factors that define how organisms interact with each other and their environment. Understanding this distinction helps us appreciate the intricacies of ecosystems and the importance of biodiversity. So, to clarify some things, a niche is not synonymous with habitat. Habitats are a place, while niches are a pattern of living. Habitat is the address, whereas niche is the job or occupation. If two organisms have the same habitat and similar niches, they will compete with each other over available resources, such as food, water, and resources. Competition is the direct struggle between two organisms within their habitat for the resources listed here. All right, so let's put all this together. So if a species can avoid competing, they may coexist. But if they compete, one organism will eventually drive the other out of the habitat, unless they have slightly different niches, like we mentioned in the warbler, the little bird that lives in different locations within a tree. All right, another example how you could have these organisms compete less would be based on time of activity. So nocturnal organisms would be active at night, diurnal organisms would be active during the day, and then crepuscular would be active between dawn and dusk. So nocturnal, diurnal, crepuscular. So while these organisms may share the same habitat, they have different niches. They can coexist without direct competition. This diversity in niches, such as the time of day that they're active, will allow for greater variety of biodiversity within that ecosystem. It allows there to be a delicate balance and preserves each organism's role within their ecosystem. All right, in result of competition, there are diversity of niches. So in order to help decrease competition, you do have a couple of niches that can be used, such as migration. This is when one organism moves from one area to another to avoid competition. And then you also have hibernation, where you have a reducing of activity for a period of time. So migration example here would be orcas. They go from different parts of the world depending on the time of year. You could also include different migratory birds that travel from South America to North America. And then you have the classic hibernation, which is pictured here with the bear. All right, guys. So if you have questions, please let me know. Otherwise, rewind the video as needed to complete your notes.